When you've been trying to conceive for month after month, year after year, and things haven't worked out the way you expected, when you start considering that fertility treatments might be what you need in order to become pregnant, you have this feeling that IVF is a light at the end of a very long and dark tunnel. If nothing else works, well, at least that will. But what happens when IVF doesn't work? When you've done everything perfectly and you're still back in that same position, how do you keep going? How do you even keep the faith that everything will work out when so far you have no evidence that that's true? I am so honored to bring you today's episode as we speak to one amazing woman who shares how she did exactly that. After 4 rounds of IVF, multiple doctors, clinics across 2 different countries, all with a diagnosis of unexplained infertility, this is a story that you don't want to miss. Welcome to your journey to fertility. This is the podcast that blends both science with spirit to give you all the tools you need as you navigate your fertility journey. I'm your host, Jennifer Edmonds, and for the last 15 years, I've been helping women on their journeys to motherhood and beyond. I believe that combining the latest scientific research along with the best energetic and mindset practices will help you to avoid putting your life on hold and bring you closer to your baby. Here each week, you'll learn ways to support your fertility and trust your body so you can stop stressing that you'll never have a baby and finally walk your path to motherhood. This is the Your Journey to Fertility podcast. Welcome back to the podcast. I am so excited for you to hear today's episode from one of my beautiful students, Jack. I met Jack a couple of years ago now where she was at the point where she was about to start IVF treatments. And she had been trying to conceive for quite some time by this stage. And she'd tried a lot of natural options and she really hadn't got anywhere. She'd been given this diagnosis of unexplained infertility. And as I'm sure a lot of us have experienced, the next sort of natural step when nothing else works after ovulation induction and cycle tracking and everything else that goes along with that, the supplements, eating right, the next step is IVF. So that's when I met Jack, and she thought that, she was relatively young, she was healthy, they had no glaringly obvious issues, that the IVF path would be easy. But sadly, that is not the way her journey worked out. And as she described, she went through actually 4.5 rounds of IVF. But spoiler alert, this one has a happy ending. And I get chills just thinking about it now. And as I was speaking to Jack, gosh, she went through so much, but she just has this beautifully upbeat and positive energy about her. And I know it's easy for her to do that now. However, I can attest to the fact that she really did manage to keep that throughout her whole journey. And that was one of the reasons why I wanted to bring her onto the podcast. I wanted to know why or how she managed to do that when she was just met with disappointment after bad news after the next. It was a lot for her to go through. Now, just before we get into the conversation, I want to remind you that at the end of this month, I am going to be hosting my free 3-day live fertility yoga series called Embrace the Journey. This is my absolute favorite workshop to teach, where you get to come over 3 days and learn how the beautiful practices of fertility yoga, breathwork, and meditation can help support you both emotionally, physically, mentally, spiritually on your journey. No matter where you are, whether you're just starting treatments or you've been through many treatments, wherever you are, there is something that will help you. I would absolutely love to have you along for this 3-day series. The link is down in the show notes. You can visit elementpilatesyoga.com/waitlist, and this will get you registered and you can learn a lot more about what is involved and everything that we will be learning. So we are going to hand over now to Jack. I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. Jack, can you believe we are here? After everything, after how many years has it been since I've known you now? And I think it's been a couple. I'm so excited to be with you and sharing your story today. So for people, just to give them a little bit of context, can we learn about who you are in a very kind of brief sense and where you were when you started this journey of trying for your family?
Yeah, sure. So I'm an Aussie expat. I live in Hong Kong. I've been here for 14 years. No intention to move anywhere else at this point. And I started trying, I would say, casually in 2022. So right after I got married, casually started trying. But I would say my journey even began a little bit before that, because as soon as I got engaged, we went to do some fertility testing to see that, I still have eggs and that my hormones looked good and we were good to go, so that there would be no rush between getting engaged, getting married, and then trying to have a baby. And so I would say this journey probably started in 2020, 2021, when I went for my first sets of checkups. And then everyone said, well, at the time, everyone said my labs looked good, my AMH was good. Why rush? Don't rush. We're fine. And so we waited until we got married in 2022. We started casually. I say casually trying because I guess I didn't really know what it meant to try for a baby, because I just thought you have sex and then you end up with a baby, full stop, right? So first 6 months went through kind of trying, and then unsuccessfully, my period would come every month. And so I went to see a doctor must have been 2023. And then in 2023, we started looking at my hormones. My hormones were actually a bit out of whack. I went on a journey with doing some IUIs. So I probably did 5 IUIs before we moved to a reproductive specialist. And then I got to the reproductive specialist and he said, oh, hang on, your hormones are so out of whack. Why have you been doing these IUIs? Also, you have cysts. So we can't even do any IVF for you right now. You need to put that all on pause. And then we went month to month with this doctor. Every month I would go in and I'd be like, is this the month? Can we try IVF now? Are we good? Are my hormones better? And finally, it was 2023 where we got to the point where we could do our first round of IVF. And that was unsuccessful. Was it 2023? Must have been. No, 2024, sorry. And then kind of just went from there. And so 2024, I took almost a full year off work and we did 4.5 rounds of IVF. And finally now we are pregnant, which is very exciting. But yeah, that's the condensed version.
The condensed version that's the word for it. Jack, thank you so much for sharing your journey. How old were you when you got married, and what prompted you to go and get those sort of preconception checks?
Yeah, so it was about 33 when I got married, turning 34 that year. And I got the pre-checks because I work as a corporate lawyer, and I feel like it's the trend, it's the thing to do for women these days, to go for these checks and engage in social egg freezing. So I had a lot of friends going through social egg freezing, whether they had policies at work to do so or whether they just thought this was the right time. So in my mind, I was already thinking, should I be doing this as an insurance policy? And I say insurance policy in inverted commas because obviously it's not foolproof, right? But it's not sold to single women who want to freeze their eggs in that way, right? So that's what had prompted that. It was the fact that I had a lot of friends who were electing to go and freeze their eggs because they were choosing to stay in the workforce and they hadn't found the right partner. And knowing that I had just met my husband at the time and we were, dating, and it all happened very quickly during COVID, I didn't know where I was in my career. I still had things I wanted to achieve. Was there a rush? If there was a rush, then we should get a move on. So I just wanted that kind of background, right? Yeah.
Which makes perfect sense. And then going into a journey knowing that everything is quote unquote fine. And then when things don't happen, it becomes very confusing.
Yeah, of course. And actually, when I look back at those labs, knowing what I know now, yes, by Western standards, perhaps the reason those doctors said, yeah, it's all fine is because, yeah, fine, they look okay, but they don't actually look great. And my AMH was never great. And my hormones were already out of whack. And so but I didn't understand, because at the time you take the doctor's word, so to speak, right? Because I'm not a specialist and there's no reason to think that something might be wrong, right?
Exactly. And it's a little bit of a chicken or the egg, you don't want to be told that, things are dire, because then you go into panic mode and then you rush into things, and that creates a whole another set of circumstances which aren't ideal for conception anyway.
Yeah.
So it's like, what is the answer here? You do everything right and it still isn't easy.
Exactly.
You mentioned you did 4.5 rounds of IVF.
Yeah.
Can you take us a little bit deeper into your IVF journey, if you are comfortable sharing?
Yeah.
How did that unfold?
Yeah, sure. So I did my first round of IVF here in Hong Kong. And basically, my estrogen was like too high. They kept telling me every month, estrogen was high, prolactin was a bit weird. And at that point, thyroid was a bit funny, but nobody seemed to be focused on it. And the doctor at the time gave me the long suppression drug, which what I understand now is like a very old drug, which depleted, well, the drug that they used depleted all of my hormones and everything down to zero. In doing that, it also reduced the level of follicles, which was not great because I already had lower AMH. But we were so set on doing a round, we wanted to get started, right? So I did my first round here, and I did it right before Chinese New Year, which means not a lot to a lot of people, except for the fact that in Asia, everything shuts down for Chinese New Year. And it can shut down for a week to 2 weeks. And that meant that the lab was also shutting down for a week to 2 weeks. So we were rushing to try and do the retrieval before the lab closed down, which meant that our first round, we got day 3 embryos, which was great, but we couldn't push further because the lab was closing. And that was that. So we did a fresh embryo transfer, lab closed down, everybody went on leave for 2 weeks. I came back, did a blood test, and my first fresh embryo transfer had failed. And then we were kind of left waiting for an answer. What next? Why did it fail? What should we be doing? What should we be looking at? We didn't really feel like we got that support. I think that my failed pregnancy test came in over a WhatsApp message, and then we had to try and engage with the doctor. And I was just so disappointed and disheartened because I thought, we've paid for all of this like care and I've got none, right? No one's here for the end of this like first little milestone to kind of support me and walk me through what went wrong and what we need to do to change the next outcome. So the next embryo transfer. So we went and we scheduled a conversation, and the doctor didn't really have much to say that was very helpful. And I was like, okay, there's got to be something else. Like there's something else. And so I was very fortunate, I was sitting in Hong Kong. There's a bunch of Chinese doctors. I leaned into my Chinese doctor. And I was doing acupuncture and I was trying to do all the other things because for the next embryo transfer, I wanted it to be right. And so I'd already been in contact with you, Jen. But at this point, I think I knew Jen by at least like a year because I saw you before my first IUI. And trying to set myself up for the next embryo transfer because we weren't going to do another egg retrieval. We wanted to do another transfer. So next transfer, we did it in Hong Kong, failed again, didn't feel like we had great support. So we started looking elsewhere. So we looked to Australian doctors. I looked to New York doctors. My husband's from New York. And finally, I think we settled Australia wasn't the route for us, but New York had some great clinics and great doctors and a very different level of care and service, right? An approach to that. So we scheduled to go to New York for our second round. And before we did that, I started panicking that maybe we were making the wrong decision. Maybe we should be sitting in our own apartment to do this. And why are we spending all this money to go to a different jurisdiction and with a new healthcare system that I'm completely unfamiliar with? Even if these doctors are the best of the best, nobody said that I need the best of the best. They've just categorized me as this like unexplained case, right? Nobody could point to anything other than my hormones being off. And so maybe it would work here. So I saw a doctor here. We started all the drugs, all the medication, and then we got to kind of close to retrieval. And he's like, there aren't many follicles. And I'm like, all right. So am I doing this? Are we doing this? And then my husband was like, why are we like why are we rushing it here if, we're booked in to go to New York, let's just go to New York. And the New York doctor, I got on the phone and I was like, I'm sorry, I've been cheating on you with the doctor here. I was going to come, but I'm scared. And so we did all these drugs and I'm sorry. And I was like, does this impact my next round with you? And he's like, well, yeah, it does. It does. So he's like, stop what you're doing. And I did. And I'm glad that I did. And then, I had to wait another month. And then we went to New York and I had my first round in New York. And that was great. Completely different. It's like run like a factory. People in and out, and the way the clinic functions felt very different to Asian clinics. And very straight talking approach to the advice, right? Kind of no bullshit, which was really nice. So we did the first round. We didn't get many viable embryos. So the advice at the time was to do a fresh transfer, and that failed. And then we went back. We came home to Hong Kong. Then we went back to New York. We did another round. And with the idea, we changed protocols. So I was happy that, the doctor had a good strategy, right? We try this. If this doesn't work, we try that. And, was closely monitoring. And it felt like I had proper care at that point. So we went back to New York for our second round in New York and did all the drugs, all good, all the blood tests, ready to go. Follicles were growing. I ovulated early, right before retrieval. And even the doctor was like, this is so rare. We monitor you so closely. It's next to impossible. Are you sure you were taking the drugs properly? Were you taking your set strategies? And I was like, oh my God, Matt, were we doing this right? Like, my husband's saying this right. I was like, well, did we? Like, oh my God. And you start going through your brain and you're like, oh. And then, I was looking at the receipts of the medication. I'm looking at the boxes that are left over. I'm looking at like everything. Is anything expired? There was nothing. It was just, my body was like, no, this is not the round for you. So we went home. We came back to Hong Kong and then waited another month. And then went back again to New York. And at this point, the doctor was like, there is no point in doing rounds unless we're pushing. If we get an embryo, we've got to push it. Even if we get 1 or 2, we're pushing it to day 5. You need to genetically test. And that was always on the cards, I think, for us by the time we got to New York, is to figure out kind of what the embryos looked like, if they were good quality embryos or not, because we were still in this unexplained category. My hormones had adjusted and my New York doctors were not worried as much about my estrogen levels being so high. They thought they could treat that. They did. And I started thyroid medication. It was a very different approach. So I went back to the last round and we're like, whatever we get, we get. If it's 1, it's 1. If it makes it to day 5, it makes it to day 5. I think in our minds, we went just with that very open approach that like no expectations. We see how we go. If we need to do this again, we need to do this again. But fingers crossed we don't. So finally we got there and we got embryos and we got some genetically tested embryos. We didn't get a bunch, but it doesn't take a whole bunch, right? And then we flew home to Hong Kong and got the call, got the updates, this is how your embryos are doing. And then had the call with the geneticist and we're like, okay, so we have a few, not a lot, but at least we have an option, right? Of a genetically tested embryo that we can transfer. Now it's all on timing. When do we do this transfer? And at this point, like this is like the whole year, right? Because it's not necessarily back to back. And I guess I was quite naive because I'd taken time off work and I wanted to go quick, right? Like how quick can you go with this process? And it doesn't work like that, obviously. And it's all up to the universe. And then it's all up to your doctors and what your body is doing. And so, I do a round or I do a bit of medication. I'd take a bit of medication, then we take a month off. Then we, do a transfer. Then I take another month. So by this point, we were at the end of last year, end of 2024. And I went across for my transfer. I was all excited. My husband couldn't join me because he had business trips. And I was like, all right, we're doing this. Like, this is my last trip to New York. Like, this egg is sticking. Like, I'm not coming back. Like, 2024, back and forth to New York. We're good. We're never doing this again. And it stuck. So, yeah, there you go.
Oh,
crazy. Yeah. but you see those half rounds, right? It was that fear, like trying to move fast, trying to make the right decision with finding the right healthcare provider, being frustrated with the first one, moving to a second one in Hong Kong, but not really being quite ready for him either, and not really dealing with him, but wanting to move fast enough that I was willing to forego potentially a better healthcare provider because I was like, oh, well, for the convenience, right? And from a money standpoint, from the fact that I had my own flat, I had my own things, I wasn't in hotels, I wasn't in service departments. I was just like, this is going to be easier, but it didn't work, right? Like, because it was too rushed, right? So
Oh, thank you for sharing all of that.
yeah, I know. I feel like I just spat at you, but anyway.
No, not at all. No, it's cathartic, I think, to be able to share. And gosh, everyone listening to this will relate to parts of your story. I relate so much to that feeling of like, well, let's go. If this is the answer, why aren't we doing it yesterday? And
Yeah.
this idea of slowing down and giving your body a little bit of space was not, it wasn't even an option to me. It's like, well, that's never really been how I've operated. Why am I going to do it now? But that's not how things work, isn't it?
Right. And it's funny, just on that point of slowing down, I think that is what helped me in the end was, you talk a lot about like your nervous system and regulation of the nervous system. Thinking about, the way that I would normally work in my job, I work very, very long hours. So finally I'd taken time off to focus on this. This was my new project, right? That's how I like really thought about it, is getting pregnant. Right? That's the project, that's the aim. And so finally by the end of that whole year, my body had slowed down because I was forced to slow down. I wasn't as rushed. I didn't have the schedule that I was previously on. And I know not everybody has that luxury to take the time, right? But even just learning to set the boundaries and really sticking to it, I think is the most important thing.
That is such incredible advice, isn't it? My forced stop point was COVID, where I couldn't keep going through fertility treatments because all the clinics were closed down and I couldn't go to work because my studio was closed. So I had this forced stop point, which I absolutely hated. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to keep going. Like, this is the worst thing that had ever happened to me. But it wasn't. It ended up being one of the best things that could have happened. And I see this over and over again with the students that I see, and I think it's a very female thing. We're taught growing up that you work hard and you achieve what you want, and that works when you want to get into the degree that you want at university, when you want to get the job that you want. Even when we're looking for a partner, we're like, well, we put in the time, we put in the hours, and it's all worked. So why would we do anything different on this?
Right. Exactly.
So what drew you to the idea of doing yoga? What was it about yoga? Were you a previous yogi or was this brand new for you?
So I wouldn't call myself a yogi, but I definitely enjoyed going to yoga. And there were some like very fancy studios here in Hong Kong that I'd love to go to, and it'd be fun, and very small classes and beautiful tea afterwards and interesting chat, and everyone's in their beautiful like athleisure wear. And so I'd go to like hatha classes and yin classes, but I wouldn't take it seriously, right? What I mean by that is I just happily go to a class on a Saturday morning if I had the time and I felt up to it. And then I feel great afterwards, right? So I think it was right before my first IUI. I started kind of Googling, like, how do I prep for my IUIs? Like, what do I need to do? Because the Western doctors were like, you don't need to do anything. You're all good. Like, we're fine. But being the person that I am, I'm like, no, I'm sure there's like a million things I could do to try and maximize this. And then I stumbled across your account. And that's when I connected with you the very first time. And I was very lucky. You run a competition like for free 101. And I was like, awesome, gonna try this. And I managed to win. And we had this wonderful 101. And we recorded the session. And then so I had this great recorded session from you that I would just do at home for a while. And then I started doing your classes I signed up to your courses, but you'd also run these like classes on a Sunday. It worked out to be a Sunday evening for me, I think, early afternoon or early evening, late afternoon. And so I do these little nice classes with Jen and whatever would Zoom in, and it was great. And so um, for me, it was just a point of relaxation, right? So it was an additional thing that I could be doing to support my body on this journey. So it was just that simple, right? And it would give me the space. The time on the mat was my little space. So like if it was 30 minutes, it was 30 minutes. And I'd block out everything. And then the 30 minutes would end. And then I'd pick up my phone and I'd check my work emails, right? But for that 30 minutes or 40 minutes, that felt really nice and my body felt good, right? And I could find that little piece of calm. So
it's so interesting you frame it that way, because that is not something the doctors ask you. You mentioned your Western doctors said to you, well, there's nothing you need to do to prep. Like, you just show up, we'll do the rest. But what doctor is asking you, what are your stress levels like? What is happening for you at work? How's your relationship? Are you sleeping? I don't think the doctors are routinely asking any of these questions. And never.
Yeah.
And we do get to a point where we are so dysregulated and things are thrown so out of whack that we see things like sleep problems, thyroid disorders, I had all of these and many, many more. And it is about finding these little forced stop points in your day, because you need them. And I always tell people, yes, I'm a yoga teacher, so that's what I teach. But it doesn't have to be yoga. But you have to do something. You have to find some way within your own life of making this whole situation bearable, because otherwise it's just everything, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And it could be just, a 30-minute walk. It doesn't need to be like the 30 minutes on the mat. But for me, it was like the 30 minutes on the mat. And I didn't do it religiously. I meet some people other women going through IVF, and then they'd have similar struggles, and they'd leaned into it, but leaned into it in such a hardcore way that, that was their routine. And it was scheduled part of their day. I wouldn't necessarily schedule it as part of my day. I just see, how my body felt. And if my body felt like I needed a break and I could schedule the time for a break, I'd just do it. Right. And then I'd feel great afterwards. So what I'm trying to say is I think people come to the practice in very different ways also. Right?
Absolutely. You do. And you have to find what works for you. And that is the crucial point as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
What else did you do that you think made a little bit of an impact on your journey? You mentioned that you saw a Chinese medicine doctor. Did you find that really helpful? And was there anything else that you incorporated in your journey?
Yeah, I feel like I did all the things, because like once you do a deep dive, you start realizing there are a million things you could or should be doing, right? So I took all the supplements, right? So, the 10 plus supplements a day. I changed my diet, right? So I saw a nutritionist here in Hong Kong. She was great. Honestly, that probably overwhelmed me a little bit because she'd set out all of these things to eat. And I got through the first month and I was like, I'm putting on weight. I'm not losing weight. And I'm eating all of this food and I can't finish this food. Like, what do you mean 2 eggs in the morning and half an avocado and 5 blueberries and this and that? And I was like, I can't do this, right? But I saw her again and a few times after that, and we readjusted. So yes, I changed my diet, but then I wasn't super, super strict with it. So I would still have the caffeine because the caffeine brought me joy, and I still have a glass of champagne because that would also bring me joy. I just wouldn't do things in excess, right? And I tried to cut the gluten because, well, maybe my body is inflamed. I do acupuncture once to twice a week. I do lymphatic drainage once a week. I found that really helped, especially when I was going through the IVF or I was on any drugs beforehand, because I felt my body would kind of swell up, my legs would swell. And that really, other than doing legs up the wall every day, the lymphatic drainage made a huge difference. What else did I do? I went on holidays and got drunk. There were like lots of little things that we tried along the way that I was just happy to try and do. Obviously, I did the yoga. I leaned into the meditation, and I took the time off work. Right, so that was the big kicker for me. I think for regulating my nervous system was I went from this fight mode, and this constant need of being online and being available and accessible to people, to then suddenly not, which was hard in the kind of first few months. But once I got the hang of it and retrained my body, it felt really good.
Mm.
Yeah.
I know that your journey has worked out beautifully in the way that, we would only ever want it to end. And you speak so, you speak about your journey in quite a funny way. And thank you for pointing out that you went on holiday and got drunk and you didn't get pregnant, because that can't be said enough. But Jack, this must have been a hugely difficult process and took a huge emotional toll on you and your relationship. And the other part of your journey that I really relate to is doing it all away from home, away from your family support. And you weren't just away from home, you were then away again in another country that you didn't live in. So can you talk about how you navigated that and what impact did it have on you throughout?
Yeah. I mean, like, we joke about it now and try and make light of the situation. I mean, there were many, many tears, and like, Jen, you received many stressful messages around embryo transfer time. It's like, oh my God, I just had a fight with my husband and he won't let me turn on the aircon and I'm hot and this, or, just like silly things. And is this embryo going to stick now because we've just spent the last half an hour arguing about the aircon? It's silly stuff, right? And you just end up in tears and so emotional about the dumbest of things, because it's all the trauma that like builds and gets to you that's like bubbling underneath. I mean, look, it wasn't fun. Obviously, it's not a fun process. Like, none of this is fun. And then you add the layer of not being with your family. I'm very close to my parents. I'm very fortunate. They're both around. They live in Australia. They came back and forth to Hong Kong. So they were here for my first round, which was great. So I had my mum to like cook me meals and things. But for the rest of the journey, they weren't around. And so in New York, you're right. I mean, I was by myself, and my husband's family is from New York, but we're not super close, right? So they knew what I was doing, but they didn't quite know. And I didn't feel like I could lean on them, and they're not invasive people. So they didn't try and insert themselves, and which meant that, like, yeah, fine. I was like staying in Manhattan and they live out in Long Island, which is a couple of hours away from where I was staying. And I was staying right near the clinic. And so, yeah, I was by myself. And my husband's friends from New York, they knew I was around, but they also didn't know what I was doing. And I didn't feel comfortable to open up and say, oh, here for an IVF round. I'm here again. Because it's a hugely personal process. And I didn't want to open up with every single person, right? So I guess I tried to create my own little support networks, which sounds a little silly, and try and romanticize it now when I think about it. But, it's like the nurse that would draw my blood in the morning. I struggle with blood draws. So I'm the worst with it. So I tried to have the same nurse every morning, and I'd go in and I knew her name and I knew her story, and I tried to get to know her. And she'd be my first chat of the day, right? So she's my first little support network. And then, it was like my service providers, right, became my friends, because I didn't have anyone, but they ended up being my support, right? So then my lymphatic drainage massage lady, I found somebody in New York as well. Fine, she wasn't as good as my lady in Hong Kong, but it didn't matter, right? And so her name was Roberta, and she lived in Queens. And so, I'd build this little network and this routine to get me through the whole process, right? So if my husband was there, he'd be at work during the day anyway. And so fortunately, we could spend our evenings together. But if he wasn't there, and a lot of the times he wasn't there for the whole process, right? Then yeah, I'd go through my little routine, and that was my support, right? I'd see Rosie in the morning, then I'd see Roberta in the afternoon, then I'd get my coffee from this person. Then, and I the supermarket runs, I'd be like, okay, so this is like this time I'm doing this. It sounds kind of silly, but that's kind of how I got through it, because you're not in your normal environment and you don't have your best friend down the road. And my parents are in a different time zone. So, I'd speak to them on my walk at 6 a.m. to the clinic to get my blood drawn, because it's their evening and they're about to head to bed. And then I wait for late evening my time and I'd be like, hi, what's on this morning, guys? And that would be it. But during my day, I had no one, right?
It doesn't sound silly at all because, we forget that a huge part of living our lives in a way that they are thriving is to come into human connection. That's how we're hardwired. That's we can't survive without it. And this whole process is isolating enough on its own. And you're right, if you are in a place where you've taken some time off work, which is amazing, it actually becomes very isolating because you go and you do the blood draws in the morning and then, well, what are you going to do with the rest of your day?
Okay. There's only so much shopping I can do. I'm also unemployed at this point because I was taking time off work, right? On leave and absence. So it's not like I'm going down to Madison Avenue in New York living this Manhattan life, like living my best life in New York on vacation. It's not a vacation, right? But then what do you do in the middle of your day? You just twiddle your thumb. So you need that human interaction, right? It was so important.
I agree. And even when people do feel very isolated and they're frustrated because people don't get it and they say the wrong things, you do still need to find the people that you can connect with because it is going to make your life so much easier. One thing I wanted to ask you, Jack, and everyone always wants to know this, I get asked this a lot, is the month you fell pregnant, what do you think it was that made it, that was the month? What did you do different? What do you think contributed to that one being the one?
Yeah, I ate gluten.
Good job.
I mean, I'm joking. I'm half joking, but I'm not even because, we kind of, each time we went to New York, we'd rented or we had access to an apartment. And when I went back for this last transfer, I had no access. So I was living in a hotel. So, all my principles about my wonderfully clean diet kind of went out the door. And so, I just kind of thought, all right, well, this is the 2 weeks that I'm here and I've got to just go with it. I think the things that I did differently. All right. So the month before I went for the transfer and the 2 weeks that I was there in New York before the transfer, I just lived life. So it was the end of the year. It was Halloween. We had friends over for a party. I drank the champagne. And I was silly and I ate the gluten and I ate the things and I didn't think twice about it. Right. And then it was Thanksgiving and we had an early Thanksgiving party here. And again, I drank the wine and I ate all the things. And I think I lived a little bit more. So I think that in this journey, a lot of the time you put things on hold, right? The celebrations, the joy, you still engage, but you're not always fully present because you're worried about everything, right? Like, how will this impact my egg quality? And is this going to disrupt my sleep? And I shouldn't be doing this and I shouldn't be doing that. There's so many should nots, right? And I really think that last kind of month and a bit, I think we were relieved that we finally had a genetically tested embryo. So in my mind, I'd prepped my body up to this point. I'd done all the things that I couldn't do anything more. And I kind of let go a little bit and the embryo was there. So if it was going to work, it was going to work. And if it wasn't, then we try again, right? And I think it was that release, that mental release that I'd let go probably was it. Yeah. And a determination never to go back to New York. Even though I said, if we need to, we will just keep going, we'll do what we need to do. But I think I was mentally we're at the year end. We're good. This is working now. Yeah.
Oh, that idea of letting go is such a big one, isn't it? And it's a very hard thing to do, that relinquishing of control.
Oh, totally. But you can't do this just because someone tells you to, because I'd be lying if I said that people hadn't told me this 6 months, 8 months prior to the successful embryo transfer. People told me this all the time, right? You gotta completely release and just kind of succumb to the process and do your best, whatever your best looks like, right? And if your best looks like, waking up in the morning and maybe doing a little bit of yoga and not doing anything else, that's fine. If your best looks like you don't want to take the supplements today or ever, that's also fine, right? but I wasn't there. It's not a switch, right? I can't just say, okay, I feel relaxed now and I'm going to release. It's like took the time. Yeah.
You're right. You can't tell someone. And I do all the time.
Yeah, I know. But it's right. But you've got to keep saying it. So that eventually when it happens, right? And
it has to happen on your own terms, in your own time, because otherwise it won't happen. And for me, I think the biggest question that helped me to let go was, how long did I want my life to be miserable for? I thought, well, I can continue to be miserable and I can do all of these crazy things that I'm doing, or I can just let a few of them go and see how I feel. And you know what? It felt amazing to throw those things away. And then I fell pregnant. And so true.
Right? It's just that kind of like throwing away and like letting go.
Yeah.
And then suddenly it all just kind of, it works out, right?
It does. It does. Thank you for everything that you have shared today. You're amazing, and congratulations.
You're amazing. And really, I couldn't have done this without you. I mean, you were probably one of my biggest rocks during this whole process. Like, my husband obviously is a big one, but then, I'd have all these side messages. He'd be like, what are you doing? And I'd be like, I'm updating Jen. I message Jen. I'm
get some credit.
Right? So I'm like incredibly grateful for your like sharing and all of your resources and everything you do for this community, because actually if I hadn't have found you at that point at the very start, I think it would have been a much, much harder journey. And so I'm grateful for you and everything you do.
Thank you, Jack. I really, really appreciate that. You're amazing. And all the best. I send you all of my love for the next, couple of months, which are going to be some of the biggest of your life.
Yes, I'm sure.
Amazing. Jack, thank you again for being here today.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening right to the end of this episode. Oh, I just filled up with so much. She just filled up my cup listening to Jack talk about everything that she'd been through. And it's not an easy journey, and to end up with one little last embryo at the very, very end of that last journey and have it turn into her little baby is just incredible. And I hope that you felt inspired and to feel a little bit about what is possible in your own journey from listening to this as well. Now, just before I leave you, quick reminder that if you haven't already signed up for my free 3-day live fertility yoga series called Embrace the Journey at the end of this month, do that right now. So down in the show notes, you'll find the link. This is a way for you to really start incorporating some of these practices that Jack spoke about in this episode in your own journey as well. They are simple, they are gentle, and they are life-changing, to put it very simply. So I'd love to see you there. If you have any questions about anything that is coming up, please don't hesitate to reach out to me as well. Now, I can't wait to have you back next week on the podcast. Before then, I'm sending you all of my wishes as you continue your own journey to fertility. The most common thing I hear from students who are on their fertility journey is that the stress of trying to conceive has taken over their life. Your days end up being filled with endless appointments, navigating pregnancy announcements. You're trying to eat right, take all your supplements, and it is all you think about from the moment you wake up. I designed the Element Fertility Yoga course to support your body, your mind, and your mental health in 3 important ways: to synchronize your hormones, increase circulation and blood flow, and to help regulate your nervous system. But on top of this, the greatest gift that you can give yourself throughout this journey is a sense of peace, to help you calm your mind and just make this process feel easier. Every single one of my students tell me that this is the first thing they notice after starting a yoga, meditation, and breathwork practice. But on top of this, you have the amazing benefit of actually supporting and increasing your fertility. Studies have shown that those participating in mind-body programs as they're trying to conceive have success rates 3 times greater than those who don't. The course I've designed walks you through natural conception as well as fertility treatments and IVF cycles. And the best part is you can work through it at your own pace in the comfort of your home. The practices start from just 10 minutes per day. To learn more, visit elementpilatesyoga.com or see the link in the show notes.